Good evening, everyone. This is David Mandel at Ohel. Welcome this evening to a conversation on his Purim, her Purim, a recovery story. Real reflections on Purim and healing. Practical tips for understanding and reducing substance-related topics. We have very important and very exciting guests this evening to have a conversation about Purim and substance abuse, which we will begin in 2 or 3 minutes, as actually in 2 minutes, as additional individuals are joining us. Give us 2 minutes and we'll be right back to you and begin a great conversation this evening. Thank you. Zamir, we're good. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Sure.
Good evening, everyone. This is David Mandel at Ohel Children's Home and Family Services. Welcome you to a conversation on his Purim, her Purim, a recovery story. Reflections on Purim and healing with practical tips for understanding and reducing substance-related risks. Before I introduce our distinguished guest panelists, I would like to thank colleagues at OHEL for organizing this important seminar, this important webinar conversation this evening. My colleagues Esther Asher, Sivi Ryder, Cheryl Chernovsky, Zamir Bohar, and Mel and Phyllis Zakta Family National Trauma Services. Everyone is invited to ask questions as we go along during the conversations on your chat function. We will try to get to as many questions as you have on the chat function at the bottom or the side of your screen. At the end of the conversation, we ask you to stay on for 1 minute for an evaluation, very, very brief 1 minute. It helps us think about how to plan additional issues that are important to you. For those that are considering doing an AI recording, we ask you not to. OHEL is recording the conversation this evening, and it will be available in approximately 24 to 36 hours. Let me begin by introducing our panelists. I've known Dr. Shalom Augenbaum for several years, and what I find most remarkable about him is his voice. He has a very calm manner in the way he addresses life's most complex issues: serious substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, gambling, internet, pornography, sexual addictions. Each one of them very serious issue, and Dr. Augenbaum's manner is very reassuring. Dr. Shalom Augenbaum is the clinical director of Ohel Tikva, and he maintains a private practice. He is the author of several books: Divorced, Behind the Mizbeach Tears, as well as Inside Outside Parenting, where he brings thoughtful insight and real world experience to complex family and relationship dynamics. It's also my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jacob Gohari, a colleague at Ohel, the medical director of Ohel Tikva, and an adjunct professor at New York University. Dr. Gohari brings deep expertise and a commitment to compassionate, patient-centered treatment to his work. I'm going to ask Dr. Augenbaum to comment first on this evening's conversation, and then Dr. Gohari, and then I will introduce our guests for this evening, Hilly and Shifra Friedman. Dr. Augenbaum, welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, David. Good evening, Chevra. Ladies and gentlemen, a good chodesh to all. And of course, good evening to my panelists, Hilly and Shifra, and Dr. Gohari, Ohel's medical director. First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for trusting us with your time. So, by way of introduction to tonight's presentation, I want to share with you a thought, with your permission. Tonight is going to be a night of stories, and so it feels right to me to begin with one. And so I want to take you back to the spring of 1935, where a 40-year-old Bill Wilson, better known as Bill W., one of the founders of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and the 12 Steps, has just gotten sober after nearly 20 years of alcoholism. That's 20 years of relapses, broken promises, despair, you name it, Bill W. experienced it. And so now he's finally sober, and he throws himself into helping other alcoholics, other people who are drunk. He lived in Brooklyn Heights at the time, he and his wife Lois. And so he opens up his home and he begins to share everything that worked for him, the ideas, the principles, the philosophies. He went at it for 5 months hard, and he did not seem to succeed. Not one of the men that he was working with stayed sober. And so one night, apparently after another failure, Bill puts his head in his hands, and he's sitting at the living room table, completely depleted, completely defeated, despairing. And just at that moment, his wife, Lois, walks by. She says, "Bill, what's going on? What's wrong?" And Bill looks up and he says, "Lois, I've been working with drunks for the last 5 months, and not a single one of them is sober. This is not working." And Lois sits down, thinks for a minute, and she looks him in the eyes and says, "But Bill, you haven't had a drink. So it has worked." Without realizing it, in that moment, Lois introduced something deceptively simple. The recovery world was never the same from that moment on. She unlocked a deep secret of recovery. And that is that by sharing our story, by carrying our message to others, we end up saving ourselves. AA has a phrase for that. And they say, when it comes to sobriety, you have to give it away to keep it. I was thinking about this for a long time. How does this work? Why does it work? Why does telling one story matter so much? And the truth is, I never came up with something adequate, but I did find that Chazal, our rabbis, actually address this. And this is the famous Gemara in Yoma, where the Gemara on Daf Ayin Hey brings the famous statement from Shlomo Melech and Mishlei, Da'aga belev ish yashchena. When someone is experiencing anxiety, fear, despair, worry, angst, doubt, yaschena. What does yaschena mean? There are two interpretations. One says yasichena midaita. He should distract himself, push it out of his mind by putting his mind to other things. And the other opinion is yasichena la'acherim. Speak it out to others. Speak it out to others? That seems pretty strange. Removing it from one's mind, distracting yourself makes sense. But if he tells it to his friend, what does he gain? He's just going to make his friend upset. And so the Ger Rebbe in the Chedushei Harim, in his Sefer, writes something mind-blowing. And he says, when a person has anxiety, obviously some suffering has been decreed from heaven upon that person. But nothing was decreed on his friend. So if he shares it, Hashem will remove the suffering from him so that he won't end up causing undue suffering to his friend. Isn't that unbelievable? And that's why this is the secret behind sharing our story and why it helps. You have to give it away to keep it. But there's another benefit that comes from storytelling. And this one is not, I did not learn this from the books, from school. This one I learned from professional experience, from sitting with people day and night coming to my office. In addiction, what I have found is more than probably anywhere else, people suffer from what we call terminal uniqueness, which is the belief that my situation is so complex, is so nuanced, is so heavy that we have difficulty believing that anything normal, anything popular, anything universal could be of any help. And this is what people say. My situation is different. No one could understand me. This won't work for me. And that belief, terminal uniqueness, it isolates. The spouse whose partner gets smashed every Friday night, the parent whose teenager is vaping or smoking too much marijuana, the shame convinces us that we're alone, that we're abnormal, and that we're beyond help. And sharing stories breaks that isolation. It tells people that no, you're not crazy, you're not alone, and no, you're not the only one. And that's why when it came time to preparing for tonight's presentation, we chose storytelling. Not theory, not lectures, just stories, to say it quietly but clearly. There is hope, and you don't have to carry this by yourself. And so I'll just end with this. The Mishnah in Megillah says something puzzling halacha. Someone who reads the Megillah backwards has not fulfilled his obligation. What a strange thing. Why would someone read the Megillah backwards? And the Baal Shem Tov sees the Mishnah saying something so much deeper. The Baal Shem Tov explained that it doesn't mean out of order in the traditional sense. Reading the Megillah backwards means thinking that the Purim is a narrative of history with no contemporary relevance. It means that you're reading the Megillah as if it only happened back then, as history, as nostalgia, as a retrospective account, and that the lessons of Purim do not endure into the present. One who takes such an attitude, says the Baal Shem Tov in his explanation of the Mishnah, is missing the entire significance of Purim and the Megillah. And you don't fulfill your obligation because the purpose of reading the Megillah is to learn how a Jew should behave in the present. And if the story doesn't speak to us in the present, then we've missed the point. And so if you look closely at the Megillah, one thing that is hiding in plain sight is alcohol. The entire Purim story is saturated in wine. Achashverosh's parties, Vashi's downfall, Haman's plotting, Esther's strategy, the whole drama is staged around feasting and drinking. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Alcohol plays both roles in the Megillah. It helps create the chaos, yes, but it also becomes part of the path to the redemption. The same wine that fuels impulsivity and humiliation at the beginning, ultimately and later on, is the setting that Esther uses to slow the king down, to time the truth, and to expose what's really going on. Meaning, the Megillah is not naive about alcohol. It doesn't pretend it's harmless. It shows that it can destroy dignity, cloud judgment, etc. But it also shows how something powerful and dangerous can be held, guided, and used with wisdom. So when the Baal Shem Tov said, don't read the Megillah as if it's in the past, he's also saying, don't read those parties like they're just some cute Persian story that happened long ago, because we are still living in a world of mishtas. Different setting, yes, but the same human vulnerabilities. In our time, just as then, alcohol is a clinical reality. It can be simcha, it can be social, it can be a tradition, and for some people, it can quietly become the thing that wrecks a home, unravels a marriage, and undoes a sense of self. So the point here is not to cancel alcohol. The Megillah doesn't do that. The point is to stop romanticizing it, to stop glorifying it. Because Purim reminds us that when people are hurting, when they feel alone, when they feel different, the first thing that they often reach for is something that dulls, something that will take the edge off. And that's why stories matter. Because stories are the opposite of numbing. They bring things into the open. They reconnect people to reality, to others, to hope. So tonight, we will not be reading the Megillah backwards. We're going to read it forward into this year, into our homes, into our community, into this Purim. And if the Megillah teaches us anything about alcohol, it's this. What you do with it matters, but what it's doing to you matters more. And if it's becoming a hiding place instead of a tool for simcha, for joy, you're not meant to face that alone. So listen to the story, and if you're struggling, know that help is out here. We at OL are here for you. Thank you. That's all I've got.
Augenbaum, that was a very good talk, and I want to highlight two things that you said. About 1,500 years ago in Babylonia, there was a sage, a great sage of that time, a leader called Shmuel Samuel, and he was speaking to his son. His son was using drugs. The Hebrew word is sam, poison. Drugs are poison. And he said to his son that take the drugs off your heart. And the explanation is that he meant two things. Number one, stop using the drugs. And number two, remove it from your heart. Talk about it. Your heart will feel better. The point that you made. And I want to go from the sage of Shmuel Samuel to Bill W. I stood up for a minute earlier because I wanted to get my copy of the Blue Book, the 12 step. Anyone listening who is helping other people in recovery, not only do people who participate in 12 steps go through this version of their Bible, but people who support them, people who help them, should also familiarize themselves so they understand what step one, step two, not only to understand and to support, but when you're speaking to a person in recovery, how long are you clean? How long are you sober? Were you holding? How many coins do you have? I'm at step three. This is a small pocket Bible also. Thank you very much, Dr. Augenbaum. Dr. Gohari, please.
Thank you so much, David. So first, just want to say it's a pleasure to be a part of this panel, and I thank you all for taking the time to join us. So tonight, I'd like to share some practical guidance on alcohol use during Purim from the medical aspect of things. Hopefully this will help everyone to make safe and informed choices during Purim, as well as on other celebrations and other nights. So first, I just wanted to start with some situations where it may not be safe to drink on Purim, and we'll go into a bit of detail on some of these aspects. So some individuals with alcohol use disorder, anyone in recovery, under the legal drinking age, individuals planning to drive, taking certain medications, or anyone with unstable medical or psychiatric illness should have some caution in terms of if they're going to drink on Purim. As Dr. Augenbaum and the Megillah have said, we know alcohol can have significant effects, right? It can worsen depression, increase impulsivity, increase suicidal thoughts, increase aggression, can significantly impact sleep. So there's definitely some negative aspects to alcohol that we do have to discuss. Speaking about driving, right, I think it's crucial to know that if you're planning to drive, drinking is dangerous under all circumstances. It's very difficult to judge accurately your level of impairment, and we know that impairment happens much earlier than most people think. So we'll go into a bit more detail about that a bit later in our discussion as well. And also another thing to take into account is medications. So as the medical director and a psychiatrist, I want to give some general guidelines. Although anyone taking medications, I would recommend that they consult with their doctor about drinking and their medications. In general, medications which do carry particularly high risks when combined with alcohol are medications like benzodiazepines. That's medications such as Xanax or Klonopin or Valium. Sleeping medications such as Ambien, opioid pain medications like oxycodone. Combining any of these medications with alcohol can significantly increase that risk of respiratory depression, overdose, and death. And speaking about anyone with significant medical or psychiatric conditions, it is important to have a thoughtful and intentional plan for Purim. It's important to say this clearly as well for everyone in our audience, that there are many ways to enjoy Purim that do not involve intoxication. Now, assuming someone doesn't fall into the categories we discussed and chooses to drink, how can we think about drinking safely? The first principle, I would say, is that safe drinking looks very different for everyone. So blood alcohol concentration can depend on many different variables, right? Sex, body weight, age, how quickly one is drinking, whether you've had food beforehand, right? We know that women typically reach higher blood alcohol levels faster than men after the same number of drinks. We know that the lower body weight can increase blood alcohol concentration. Drinking on an empty stomach can significantly increase absorption. And we know that drinking quickly can also dramatically increase the risk. So what is a safe number of drinks? Well, first, I think let's define what a drink means. So in the US, a standard drink is 14 grams of alcohol. And what that translates to is a 12-ounce can of 5% beer, a 80 proof shot of liquor, which would be 1.5 ounces, or a 5-ounce glass of 12% wine. So thinking more about safely drinking, I think there's two main things to consider in terms of questions. One is something we spoke a bit about earlier, but at what point does alcohol impair driving? And the other is, at what point does alcohol become medically acutely dangerous, where there's a risk for alcohol poisoning, coma, or death? So in terms of general examples, again, this will vary, but I just want to give some general guidelines. For a 200-pound male, which is the average weight of a man in the US, 2 to 3 drinks within a couple of hours can impair your ability to drive, and about 4 drinks in that time frame can lead to blood alcohol concentration exceeding 0.08%, which is the legal limit for driving in most states. But it's important to note that impairment begins much earlier than that. So research shows that impairment in driving ability can occur at levels as low as 0.02%. So for many individuals, that can be 1 or 2 drinks. On average, alcohol is metabolized at approximately 0.015% per hour. So what that means is it can take several hours for your blood alcohol concentration to return to 0. And there's nothing other than time that really speeds that up, right? Coffee or taking a cold shower, right? These things won't speed up that processing of alcohol in your body. So let's speak a bit about in terms of acute medical danger, like where are these limits? So for a 200-pound male, as we discussed earlier, so consuming 12 to 13 drinks within a short period of time can lead to levels of alcohol poisoning. For a 170-pound female, which is the average weight of a woman in the US, 2 drinks can cause impairment, 3 drinks may result in intoxication, and 9 or 10 drinks can lead to those dangerous levels. And for teens, for example, a 120-pound teenager, intoxication can occur with as little as 2 drinks, and serious danger can occur within 5 to 6 drinks consumed rapidly. So I think the key point here is that consumption of large amounts of alcohol within a short amount of time can lead to alcohol poisoning, which can carry risks of vomiting, coma, and death. And there are many factors, right, which we spoke about, that can contribute to how alcohol affects an individual. So, of course, people will drink and celebrate Purim. So I think if someone does choose to drink, I'd also like to provide some practical safety strategies. One is eat and hydrate beforehand. Pace yourself, right? Alternating between alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks, whether it's a few non-alcoholic drinks and 1 alcoholic drink. Avoid drinking games when possible, as we know drinking games can lead to binge drinking and rapid amounts of alcohol use. Don't mix alcohol with medications or other substances. Stay with trusted friends, and have a ride home planned. Another thing I wanted to mention today is that there's been a large increase in the amount of non-alcoholic beverages available, right? We know non-alcoholic spirits, beers, and seltzers have really made a significant increase in their popularity. And in part, that's because there's a trend of younger adults drinking less alcohol and increasing interest in safer alternatives. So choosing some of these options can also help model responsible behavior for the younger generations. So finally, if alcohol feels hard to control, or if you find yourself worrying about your drinking, you don't have to manage that alone, as Dr. Augenbaum had mentioned. This is something we treat medically. Support is always available. At Ohel, as well as other agencies, we have many resources available, including individual therapy, group therapy, medications, some medications which can reduce cravings of alcohol, or some medications which can help reduce the amount of drinks that you do have when you drink, as well as many other types of medication strategies. And I wanted to thank you all for joining us tonight and for taking the time to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Dr. Gohari, one of the main points that you brought up is that there are many ways to enjoy Purim without getting intoxicated. And you gave so many examples as to how to do that, including a number of drinks, and pacing yourself and eating and not rushing. And Purim, we know, one of the famous expressions is that you drink until you don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. One of the points that I would respectfully add is that if you're hosting individuals or you have young people coming to the house, there are many young people that come to the house, knocking on your door, ringing the bell to collect for whatever organization or yeshiva they are. Don't offer them drinks. Keep in mind that they are knocking on 5, 8, 10, 12 doors during their travels. Number two, when hosting a meal, you have wine, spirits, whatever you have on the table, and you're offering it, and the person says to you, no thanks, move on. One no thanks is enough. They may not like drinking. They may be in recovery and people don't know it. Don't ask a second time. Very important points that you made, Dr. Gohari. Thank you very much. We're coming back to Dr. Gohari and Dr. Augenbaum in a few minutes. Let me introduce our primary guests of the evening, Hilly and Shifra Friedman. They are going to share with us a brave personal journey through addiction. Their story highlights the power of resilience, healing, and recovery. We're going to begin with Hillel, who'll talk about a little bit about his story, the journey, where he is today, and then Shifra, and then we'll engage in a conversation in our shared living room. Hilly, thanks for joining us this evening. Shifra, thanks for joining us this evening. Hilly, thank you very much. You're on mute.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I'd like to share my story, and I want to make a disclaimer that this is no judgment or blame towards anybody. This is just my personal thoughts, experience, and this is my journey. So for me, growing up, life, felt it was very systematic. I didn't connect so much with with the way I was being brought up. It was very rigid. And I didn't really have people that I was able to share that with, and feel, heard. At a very young age also, I went through certain abuses that it really broke my self-esteem, and it brought a lot of shame. And not having the support or guidance, to talk to anyone about it, nor having the tools how to deal with them. I didn't have so much a sense of self, and I didn't really understand, what I'm going through. Without awareness and stuff, what happened was that it caused a lot of resentment for me, and it caused also for me to hate the community that I was, that I grew up in. It brought a lot of anger. And I had to hide those feelings, being that I didn't have, where to express them. And so my coping mechanism, the way that I, the way that I dealt with it at the time was that I always had this outlook and this belief or something that, as soon as I'm going to get away from these problems, I'm going to get away from where I was brought up, things will just figure itself out. And that was like my mindset, my outlook. It's just getting away from this area, from these problems, these people, and things will just be better. I had a lot of anger, and it started coming out more. I acted out. I don't know, I could say, I was starting to rebel against the the system that I was in, and I started having challenges at school, and I ended up not finding a right school or place for me to fit in. And so at age 15, I ended up going to Israel, to yeshiva there. My mindset was, I'm so-called going to go to yeshiva, but I'm going to, just, do my thing, be on my own. And also there was an aspect of, not being around the authority figures that I had. They're not going to see what I do. And, I'm not going to be able to let them down, or let anyone down for that matter. And so I ended up, going to Israel, and with that mindset, after like not too long, I had challenges and issues in that school. I ended up getting kicked out of that school, and being afraid of the reaction I'll get if I tell my parents or anyone that I got kicked out. I didn't share that, and I just ended up going back, taking an apartment, and for a while they thought that I'm still there. And I kept on going back and forth from Israel to America for for holidays or other stuff, and I started kind of living a certain dual life. In Israel I would do whatever I felt like doing, and dress the way I wanted, but when I would come back I would have to show up and act a certain way, and it had that dual life feeling to it. I just I didn't feel like I can be myself when I came home, when I came home into the place I grew up. And so, like I said, I got kicked out of school. I took an apartment, and I ended up meeting some friends, and started to experiment with drinking and smoking. Drinking meaning I would go out more nights, just trying to, I guess, find a way to feel good and release some of certain pains that I had inside. Those things didn't really soothe the it didn't soothe the pain I was in, and I experimented a little, but when I went back to America at a certain age, a while after, I was around 18 or 19, I don't remember exactly, I was exposed to hard drugs, and that I right away connected to. It really gave me a certain relief of, it soothed and relieved a lot of stuff that I had, anger, not feeling okay with myself inside, being, accepting myself, being able to be anywhere and just feel okay with myself. And so I really started, using right away a lot of hard drugs. That right away came along with a lot of problems. First of all, it was very physically dependent, and I would get very sick if I wouldn't have it. My behaviors would start, I would change my behaviors. I started acting out much more, and things at home became more complicated, a lot of conflict and chaos at home. I would have like these extreme highs and then extreme lows, and basically all along, try experimenting with that, or not experimenting, using. The thing is, I didn't address ever the issue that was really going on, which was, internal stuff that I was going through. The focus was always that, with the people around me, parents, or even myself, it was always just in a very external type of solution. It was more like a patching up, what's going on. These things are not manageable. These things are not okay. So stop that. It doesn't look good, or it was never addressing why, or what's the reason of what's the reason why I'm in the need of using those things. So that was always the focus. It was a very external type of focus. That went on for a while, and I was trying to always control it. That was my approach to it. It just use it in a way that I can have it under control.
Hilly,
Yeah.
what kind of drugs were you using?
I started with heroin was my first drug.
You started with heroin.
Right.
Go ahead.
So, I basically tried. What happened once I tried, that like I said, the solution then at home or for me was trying to find a way to control it. So what ended up happening was that I started being sent around to programs and treatments and management types, all different types of ways to just find that external solution to just figure out how to stop or control the dependency or the unmanageability of these drugs. But
Hilly,
on
I'm going to fast forward a bit. We'd like to hear from Shifra also, and then to bring you both back together. You started at 18.
Yes,
At what age did you say to yourself it's time to stop? What was the first time that you tried to stop?
so I was gonna get that in a second. That so like I said, at this point, I wasn't willing to stop because there was no real defense for me. I didn't find a major reason or alternative on why to stop. At age 25, things got really out of hand. And that was the first time that for myself, realized like, oh, this cannot continue. And this is getting a little out of hand, that I kind of on my own decided that I have to check into inpatient rehab and, to get off these street drugs and the way that I was using it. But in my mind, I was then telling myself that if I take prescription drugs or it's from a doctor, then that's considered clean. So at age 25 was the first time that I basically saw, that these things are getting out of hand and I got to do something about it. That was the first time.
Where did you get the money to buy drugs? The quantity that people use is not cheap. Where did the money come from?
A lot of different ways, selling them, uh, stealing. It was using with friends, and you have to come up with strategic ways. It was honestly, I mean, these are the basic ways that I can tell you off the top of my head, but there were lots of ways that I can't even. I don't even know myself. I can't think back, and it's a full-time job.
Haley, I'm going to take a break with you for a couple of minutes and bring Shifra into the conversation. And Shifra, you're sitting in the same house listening. You've heard everything that Hilly said, I'm sure, more than once. So tell us when the two of you found each other. How many years ago? How old were you? How old was Hilly?
Hi, so I'm Shifra. Um, I don't even remember the exact age I was. I was in my young 20s. Hilly was, I think, 27. I was maybe 24, something like that. And I met Hilly, and I was right away drawn. Sorry, give me a second. The echo. So I was right away drawn to, our alignment spiritually and our mindset and our vision. And we dated, and quickly just moved to Israel, and we were starting our life. And very quickly, I recognized that there were discrepancies, and there was little things that were just, we call them red flags, that I right away recognized that I did not have the full story. And it put me in a little panic, to be very honest. And as I tried to navigate this new marriage which is essentially a stranger, right at that point, it was extremely difficult. I mean, until things started getting more in the open and me recognizing how much of a breach of trust we started on. Yeah, that was almost, we had like that brief honeymoon phase of like the dating and the actual wedding. And then quickly from there, as I recognized the depth of, an issue that I had no experience with, it was really difficult. I was building a foundation on a bed of just mistrust is one thing, but there was also at a point where bringing these things to light, I was met with a lot of defenses, and it was essentially like poking the bear. Part of Hilly's story, which he can get to, is a part of him that he tried to hide or tried to have that new beginning that I also wanted to have. And just kind of us trying to work through this really essentially just pushed us further and further apart, because I don't think either of us were equipped to deal with how big the elephant in the room was. And there was,
Shifra, can we talk about
yeah,
Shifra? Let's
yeah,
talk about the elephant.
yeah,
The elephant is always important. It really is. And
yeah.
tell us about some of the red flags and describe the elephant.
So in the beginning, like, he would tell me stories about his time in Israel, and I was under the assumption that he experimented, and I recognized how much more than experimenting happened. And then quickly recognized that there was active using still happening, that I had no idea about, and that we actually discussed and was kind of evaded when we were dating. And so recognizing all of a sudden that he has an extreme past with drugs, and then seeing even prescriptions around, that was enough for me to recognize that I'm in way over my head. And that was the elephant, that I obviously didn't know the extent. And so the fear of the unknown was huge, but also recognizing that it's active and it's in my home, and I'm thousands of miles away. And also, like, I'm trying to build this life with somebody that I want to trust and look to for leadership. And I definitely was not getting that.
I love that word, looking for leadership in a relationship. That's very remarkable words. Hilly, you've heard all this before. How does it, I mean, you're listening to this live in front of an audience. How does it sound? Hilly, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. It sounds very real. That's what it sounds. For a long time, I was very much in denial. I was very much in denial of, what recovery or what being sober and clean, or even for me, what is the solution for, a new path in life? It's like I said, beforehand, I would always think that it's just this physical external thing. You take drugs. I was addicted. It was unmanageable. It was a lot of pain that was, behind it, that I was trying to cover up with. And it was very hard for me to face what it's doing to me and what I'm causing to others. And especially going into this marriage with this hope of a new beginning, and really with the tools that I had then, really trying to do my best. And then realizing, which that was a very, very hard part, realizing that the letdown and disappointment that I'm causing, it brought up a lot of old, old emotions that I've had as a kid, that I let down people, and I'm a disappointment. And it made it very hard for me to be able to be honest and really share where I'm at, with the concern that I'm not going to be accepted and I'm not going to be okay. And I was never able to look into myself to see, like I said, what I'm causing. I didn't understand. I didn't understand what people want, because I didn't understand myself. I didn't understand what I need. I wasn't able to see even what, the next step should be for me to be able to have a healthy, stable life.
You're bringing out such an important point that a lot of people turn to drugs or drugs and alcohol because they don't see themselves as having value or being valued, and you don't feel good about yourself. And so you turn to drugs or alcohol to dull the pain. I would like everyone that's listening to this conversation to recognize the 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 importance, the bravery of Shimi and of Hilly and Shifra, who are using their names and their faces and speaking publicly in front of you, and also to understand that we spoke in advance, and everything that we're talking about tonight is with their permission, with their consent, because by sharing their story, and especially before Purim, they want to speak to that one person in the audience who may be helped, who may be using, who may be in recovery. If they're using, they will get to recovery. If they're in recovery, they're going to be stronger and help somebody else. Um, how long are you clean, Hilly?
In July, it's going to be 5 years.
Everyone's sitting home. Okay? A little applause. Everyone's sitting home. Good for you. You're getting a coin
Thank
every
you.
year?
Yeah, I
So
got
I
a coin. I
recently,
also I participate in the living room. They have a lot of help for boys, girls, adults, whatever. They have a lot of support for families. They have Shabbatons. They also give a necklace by the first year, and by they have different times that they give different things. They say by 5 years you get your marbles back, and they give you a certain plaque. So God's willing, I'll make it. I'll get that this year, July.
July. Okay. Invite us. Invite us. Okay? Invite everybody. Good,
Absolutely.
good, good. Shifa, tell us a little bit more about what's going on in your lives. When did you turn that corner? You, the two of you together.
So I think that it's important to lead up to the point before we turn the corner. Give me 1 minute. Yeah. So before we turned the corner, things had to get very bad, actually. And so while going into the marriage, there was some, I guess, misuse of prescription drugs and stuff like that. Um, the before the corner, I was living with full blown addiction in our home. I had a very young child at the time in the house, and it was just honestly chaotic. To describe a situation in a home with hard drugs is is essentially like trying to treat a cancer patient with no doctors and no anything. It was like I was in the caretaking role, I was in the um finances role and just staying up all night, and there was, I mean, just being able, like just being in the position of like seeing needles around and watching the person that you care so deeply about struggle so deeply and have it affect me so much, and not having anything that I could essentially do about it. I mean, at that point, I resorted to staying up till 3 a.m. to just make sure he was alive. But it essentially was, there was no night, there was no day. And I felt so alone. I mean, at that point, I actually thought it's laughable looking back, but I thought we were the only from people that struggle with this. And I would question if we're from, because if there's addiction in the home, then that must, like, it can't be. So I would just be like, wait, are like, I didn't get that concept. I was like, I felt like one in the entire like Brooklyn for sure. And it was COVID time, and it was just like, no matter what, nobody, I couldn't speak to anyone about it. Some people that I did turn to just, either were in denial. I was just, like I said, in over my head. I had no real direction. And also when I was dealing, and like I think a lot of people similar to me deal with, if the person that's struggling is not ready for help, like there is literally nothing that I could have done to get him there sooner. And I was just there for the ride. Like I just was there to be there at the nights and the dark moments, and it was excruciating. And ultimately, um first of all, I still had to go to Simchas and smile as if nothing's going on, and most people didn't know what was going on. And I think that was also a big part of it. It's one of those things that aren't cool, like it's not cool enough to speak about. Nobody's sending kugel, nobody's sending flowers for Shabbos. It's something that I was deeply struggling on my own. Um, and ultimately the addiction progressed to such a bad point that I ended up having to step away for the safety of myself and my young child. And that in itself was also just, you would think that it would provide some relief, but I was, it was heartbreaking, to be honest. Um, and I also felt like I could do no right in that situation. If, if I would stay, I always felt like I was just letting somebody down. And ultimately at that point, it was the first time that I had to just recognize that I have to listen to my own self and figure out what I need and what will keep me safe, and stop listening to the voices of who I'm going to let down. Because I don't think in a situation that I was in, or that many people find themselves, that there's a right way. Staying is a problem, leaving is a problem. You did get them help, you didn't, you did too much, you did too little. There's literally no right way to handle it. And I think for a big while, like that shame and the failure, like just wanting it to be okay and wanting to believe that, and Hilly was trying, honestly. I remember the disappointment of, him stopping, and then a couple of days later using again. I vividly remember how, that yo-yo of like going on that ride with him. So yeah, definitely that was like the turning point for me, I think, was recognizing that as much as I do research and find the programs and whatever, like it was getting too dangerous, it was too much, and I completely lost myself. Like I was a shell of a human. There was no night, there was no day. I was just in that feeling. I think anyone listening to this has felt this feeling of heartbreak, where you feel like your heart, like that. You feel like the cracks in your heart, like that's kind of where the place I was in. Um, Not
Shifra,
knowing.
you went into survival mode,
Yeah,
fight or flight. People need to
yeah.
survive. Dr. Gohari, Shifra said that during the chaotic times, She felt like she was treating a cancer patient without a doctor on her own. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a powerful statement. And I think when we think about substance use disorders, right, they can be severe as uh, treating a cancer patient, right? I think some other things that she had mentioned, right, feeling powerless and along for the ride. I think that's a very, very common feeling for partners and family of individuals with substance use disorders, as well as the individual themselves, oftentimes.
Dr. Augenbaum, getting support from others, a person who has an addiction not only needs to, on their own, decide that they are ready for sobriety, recovery, they also need a good amount of support from family, friends, community, whatever it may be. The Shifra spoke about, she needed to take care of herself at some point. How do you find that line, Dr. Augenbaum, so that you don't get drawn in and you fall into the abyss while you're trying to help that person?
Yeah. And I think Shifra spoke to it well, as did Hilly. There is a certain point where you come to the realization that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And at that moment is when you have to say that the person that is struggling has to take responsibility or accountability to getting the support that they need, and the other partner has to take care of themselves as well. So that is there's a breaking, in this case, let's say a relationship, as a way to begin rebuilding. And the rebuilding is not what existed previously. It's the start, hopefully, of a completely new, redefined relationship. So break of the old, and kind of like the phoenix, it just kind of is a rebirth of a new type of relationship. And that's what it sounds like happened here with the two of you. I'm certainly curious to hear how the story ends up.
Ellie, how old are you?
35.
35? So
Sorry.
what was going on 5 years ago at the age of 30 that you crossed that line?
Of becoming sober.
Yes.
So like Shifra demonstrated very clearly how the energy and situation at home was. It came to a point where to say it in one word was a gift of desperation. I came to a place, I remember even Shifra, walking out, that honestly, that's how sick I was at the time, looking back, that wasn't the day that I ended up, going to rehab. It had to, I don't know, I don't remember the exact time, but a couple of weeks, maybe a few months after that there was no other way. Life was just rock bottom for me. And the only way was to basically surrender. And I gave up on the way that I was doing things, because I saw that is not working. There's no way that's going to continue working. And I basically surrendered to what needs to be done. And I made a decision in my mind, a commitment that I was, for other than a lot of drugs I would take, I was on a substance called Suboxone, which is an aid for heroin, which I got prescribed very early on to try to, maintain to be off heroin while doing other drugs. And that was honestly the most physical dependent thing I was on. It's something very, very difficult, to get off of. And I basically then made a decision that I'm going to do whatever it takes to kick that. And I knew that once I kicked that, it'll be easier to be off anything else, because that was always the thing that held me, not being able to get, off everything completely. And so I made that decision, and I was willing. and I surrendered to what needs to be done in order to do that. I checked into a rehab, and I started basically seeing myself. I was willing to look at myself and see what needs to be done in order for me to get first physically over the dependency, and then obviously get some real look into myself and see what type of emotional and spiritual help that I needed. That was the starting point.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hilly went from surrendering to the drugs to surrendering for recovery. A very different type of surrender. The same words, but used in two very different ways. From a weakness to a strength. Shifra, Hilly, what's your like today? Shifra, what kind of support did you receive from friends, family, parents, in-laws, colleagues? Was there shame? Was there stigma? At what point did you stop hiding? At what point did you realize that I am not the only one that's dealing with a problem like this in life? What was your community like?
So ultimately, while Hilly was still using, the support was almost non-existent. Yeah, it was just I was alone in this. And not that I just wasn't open with my own family, and they wouldn't have had anything to offer me either way, because I come from a family of like non-drinkers, anti-smokers, and everything. And so ultimately during active addiction, my support system was really at minimum. From basically the night after I left, I joined Al-Anon, and I went to 2 meetings a day on headphones with my screaming baby, from that day forward. And that was a huge support for me. I found the sponsor very early on, and I just committed to doing everything it took. I made a decision at that point that I can't feel this pain any longer, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to help myself feel better. And so, starting with the 12-step process, and then making friends in recovery, and ultimately, way further down the line, us together joining things like TLR, the living room, and, a good friend of mine at this point started something, the Comfort Zone, which is for women that are impacted by addiction. I definitely, right now, I have a huge support system, and I definitely have people to turn to. But in the early days, there was a lot of shame. And definitely, I did have good friends at the time to hear me out, but, they were just listeners, and which was so important. But in an impactful way, I definitely didn't have a team of people around me. Once I left, I definitely, thankfully, my family stepped in, and they did offer support just on the small things of, Shabbos and having a meal to go to, which was huge. But overall, I'm grateful that through this process of committing to like the 12-step work that I was doing, I definitely found my village. And, through, again, like I said, the living room, places like this that we together as a couple joined, that was invaluable, to us as a unit, to help us go from like where we were to like trying to, feel better and have support for how we felt, because this was all new to me. Like, I didn't understand drugs. I didn't understand recovery. I didn't like, it was so new. And so I really did appreciate always hearing somebody that was further along in the process. Something that sticks out to me was, I remember early on when we joined, a Shabbaton, and I heard one of the old timers share about like a Shabbos that was really, really hard. And I remember thinking like, oh my goodness, like they also struggled. Like I was like, so confused by the fact that they also had their story that looked as messy as mine, because I was living it daily. And there's also that part that, sobriety doesn't fix everything. And so those, it wasn't a magic pill. And so the recovery helped me feel a little bit better, helped me have support, but it takes a lot of trust and patience, and healing the codependency within myself, which I'm actually grateful for in this process. If there's something that I'm so grateful for, is that I started to prioritize my own self and a connection that feels a lot less demanding and a lot more, of something that's, a healthy back and forth. So yeah, definitely thankfully I've gotten to a place where I was seeking support and I mean, one of the first things that I mentioned to Hilly when he left rehab was that that was like that one boundary I remember was that we would need to be a part of a family support system in order for us to even have a chance. Because I knew what drugs were and I lived with it once and I knew that I was powerless enough to know that I would have no shot if 10 days later he's using again. And so for me that was an important anchor to make, to anchor us in in a place of recovery, in a safe zone where we both have support. And that was, so helpful.
Ellie, someone is asking a question. As a friend of a person in recovery, what is the best way to be supportive? Is there anything that well-meaning people say or do that is hurtful or unhelpful? And I often describe this well-meaning people who say stupid things. So, Haley, what is the best way for people to be helpful, to be supportive of someone in recovery? Supportive, helpful to say, helpful not to say.
Wow, that's a full question. That's I don't know. I find that not just the recovery, that when you are with a person, you don't always have to say something to be of help. If you're just there with someone, and that person can feel that you're actually there because you're supportive and you have no judgment. So obviously you have to have no judgment. Um, I think it it depends on the situation and what type. But I think for me, I was lacking a lot of feeling worthy, like I said, and having someone that believes in. I remember I was working with someone while I was using for a couple of years, a very respectful guy, and he was one of my biggest supporters, not even telling me, not like telling me outright, I support you or anything, because he always treated me with respect and didn't have any judgment, and I felt it. So I think it has to come from a genuine place, that if somebody actually doesn't judge someone and treats the person, not looking down at them because they have, I guess it's understanding, where the person comes from, and treat them the same as any other human being. And when you feel the love and support from someone, I think that's the biggest help you can give to someone.
I want to turn the question around. I've gone to 12-step meetings with individuals who I've provided support to. And I've sat through many 12-step meetings of all the addictions that, you know, we understand. So I'm sitting behind, everybody goes around the room. Hi, I'm so and so, 6 months, 5 years, 22 years, great, great conversations. I'm sitting behind this young woman who introduces herself and she says the following. Let me tell you, a beautiful young woman. She may have been 20 years old. And she said, Hi, my name is, and I've been in recovery for one day, and I didn't think I could make it. And I walked onto a bridge, but I decided to come to the meeting instead. I've gone to meetings, I speak to people. I will never forget those words. I'm in recovery one day. She's not listening. Talk to her, Hilly. What do you want to tell her?
So I think that, the transition is always the hardest, was the hardest part, and I believe is the hardest part. It's coming from a certain place to where you have no defense against using because the alternative seems very dark. And so using is a solution for them until it's not. But even when it's not a solution, you have to sometimes be at a place, or I was at a place where I was so desperate to change that I was willing and committed to do anything it takes. And a lot of it was, turning to Hashem and having a connection with Hashem. But once I did that, and I could speak now, but even it didn't have to take so many like these few years. Even right after the overcoming the challenge and having a certain stability of not having extreme highs and lows, up and down, fluctuating emotions, even from every aspect, physical, mental, emotional, I started feeling so much better about myself and about life that, now I don't have to think, I don't have to look to, it's not like I have cravings every day and it's a battle every day. I'm not getting into the AA aspect of you always stay, addict always stays an addict, but my life has so much meaning, and life can be, and life is so beautiful that it is hard to do, it's a transition, but life is way, and in a way, I'm grateful for the journey that I went through because it brought so much more meaning to my life nowadays, which if I wouldn't have gone through, I don't think I would have, gotten to such a deep meaning and being able to overcome challenges in other areas in life. I can only do it through gone through a certain journey to bring me to where I'm at now. So I think it's very hard from my experience to speak to someone that is not willing, like Shifra said, that it's not willing to recover, but a person that does want, it's just they find it hard. There is so much help out there, and it is very hard. It is very hard. It's in that transition, period, but it is so rewarding after, and you get a much deeper. If with the right tools and approach to life, it's way more meaningful than it has ever been.
Shifra, for every coin that Hilly gets, you get two.
If only.
Dr. Augenbaum, is it too simplistic to say we're speaking a lot about Purim, and Dr. Gohari really gave a lot of information about being careful, everything in moderation, everything in life in moderation? Is it overly simplistic to say that there may be some individuals out here that are listening or that we know that are using alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, and Purim may be the perfect day to start day one of recovery, Dr. Augenbaum?
Oh, Purim may be day one of recovery. I thought you were going to say Purim may be a day one of very destructive, potentially destructive addiction. But listen, I hope it is the first day of recovery. Yes, it is possible for Purim to be a day of recovery. Hilly, I'm sure, could speak to that. But I think you're raising a good point. Like, this is the thing. This is the unknown. Like, no two people are built the same, and depending on how you understand addiction, for one person, Purim could just be Purim of drinking, and they walk away, shake it off, and get up the next morning, and they're fine. I could tell you, and I'm sure Hilly and Shifra have heard stories as well about the immediate, the same way Hilly described with heroin. Like, you take a sip, and all of a sudden, you just felt what we call an internal subjective shift. And it's at that moment that you can begin now a very, very dangerous road that could potentially lead to addiction. And that's why it's a wild card. So, yeah.
Dr. Gohari, thank you very much. Dr. Augenbaum, thank you very much. I could add, it's not a commercial for Ohel because there are many, many places that people can seek help, get help, good professional help. Dr. Gohari is psychiatrist at Ohel, specializing in full range of addictions. And Dr. Shalom Augenbaum, the director of our outpatient addiction treatment services. the full gamut of addictions: alcohol, drugs, internet, pornography, gambling, sexual addictions. And it works. It does work. And Shifra and Hilly, in addition to saying thank you for your strength, it does take a lot of courage to stand in front of an audience who you don't even know. It's not like you're standing in the room looking at people. There have been some very nice comments, including from people that have said, I'm so proud to be their friends. I'm so proud to call you a friend. So, whatever goodness we have as little people, to give you our blessing, our support for continued strength, a continued strong life, that your worst day should be behind you, and Hashem should give you everything that you ask for 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and everything should be good in your life. And we mean that so sincerely. And we thank you so much for speaking this evening. It was really strong, really, really strong. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. To all my colleagues at Ohel, thank you for organizing this evening. The recording of tonight will be available within the next 24, 36 hours. We can send it to you. You can request it, including those that have not listened to the chat. We ask you if you can stay on for literally a minute to complete a very quick, short survey. It will help us plan for future conversations. Everyone have a safe, wonderful, enjoyable Purim. Good night.